Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this webinar, Planning Your Graduate Studies Journey Roadmap. This is the first part of a series of events that will talk about planning your graduate studies journey, hence the name Roadmap. So this is the first part. This event is hosted by the Graduate Student Council, and my name is Khalifa Al Khalifa. I'm the Secretary of the Graduate Student Council, and I've just begun my second year in the curriculum and instruction English education. I'll be your moderator for today's session, and I would like to start with introductions from the board members, and then we will move to the speakers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Wood Ishen. I'm a third-year doctoral student in early childhood doctoral program. I'm the president of the council, and thank you so much for our speakers for joining us today, and to everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Turan Ahmadova. I am a vice president of Graduate Student Council, and at the same time, I'm a doctoral student in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies program. So thank you for being here today with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Viana. I am with the Tesla program, and I'm a candidate right now. I'm a treasurer with the organization. So thank everybody to show up and to support us.
And we have an incredible panel of speakers, each bringing unique perspectives and experiences to help us better understand what it means to thrive and not just survive throughout our academic journey. So please, speakers, present yourself and introduce yourself. Dr. Black?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Bill Black. I'm a professor of educational leadership and policy studies, and now for 4 months, Associate Dean of Graduate Studies here in the College of Education. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Carlo? Or Dr. Han?
Okay, I'm finally unmuted. Thank you. My name is Maria Carlo. I'm an associate professor in Child and Family Studies in the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. I do research on bilingual development of children in early childhood, all the way up to sort of the upper elementary grades. And so I have a deep connection with all of you in the College of Education, and I am so grateful to have been invited. I guess part of my ulterior motives for being here is also to just sort of bring your view towards the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences, because we could be great outside members for all of you. There's lots of points of connection. So that's my ulterior motivation for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Sophia Han. I am in the Department of Teaching and Learning in the College of Education. My major area of interest is early childhood education and teacher education. So I do a lot of work with like training pre-service teachers who wants to become teachers of young children. And also one of my specific sort of like, research interest is like supporting Asian American families and children in schools and communities. I was thrilled to be invited to this, presentation, because I think, all faculty, all of us have been in your shoe at one point. We've gone through graduate school, right? And for me, like especially, I also, am coming from an international background. I mean, once upon a time, I was in your shoe as an international student going through the U.S., higher education institution, and now I'm on the other side. I've been at USF like 16. This is my 16th year, and counting my prior faculty experiences, it's over 20 years. I'm like, I cannot believe it's been that long. But so I hope that I can bring some insights to this panel today. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you all for being here. And I noticed that Dr. Ann joined us. Please, Dr. Ann, if you would please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. I just was actually going to listen in, but thank you for the opportunity to introduce. I serve as the advisor for the Graduate Student Council, and just excited to see all of you here. And this group this year, as I was telling Anthony yesterday, is doing just a super job of providing opportunities for graduate students. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the audience, thank you very much for joining us to what is promised to be an insightful and inspiring discussion delivered by our speakers. Thank you all for being here. And just before we start, at the beginning, we will be talking about some reflective questions about the beginning of the journey, and then we will move to time management, and then finally explore how to build meaningful relationships with faculty and advisors, and then we will move to the Q&A session. So the audience, please, if you have any questions, just type them down in the chat. We will address them later on. So to start us off, I would like to ask a question. Let me just go to the presentation here for the speakers, and please feel free to answer this as you please. Think back when you were first started your academic journey as a doctoral student, the first semester. What is one thing you wish someone had told you on day one? You can answer in whatever order you would want to.
You're sure you don't want to call on us and put us on the spot? I'll take a crack at this. I think the thing that took me the longest to learn, and that I wish I had figured out, and when I say longest, like way years into my career as a professor, it was a problem I just dragged along, and it was sort of this false dichotomy between thinking and writing, and this idea that I had to figure out what I wanted to say before I sat down to say it. And it took me a really long time to figure out that writing and thinking are like one thing, one activity, and I just can't tell you how many holidays I ruined for my family because I needed this week of vacation to write, because and was still struggling with what is it that I want to say, until, like, with all the pains of sort of going through that process, it sort of dawned on me that sitting down to write is sitting down to think, and it has eased a lot of the pain since then.
Thank you. Dr. Black, Dr. Han?
Go ahead, Dr. Han.
Sure. This was hard, like finding one thing, because I think I listed like 4 things or something. So with the 4, maybe one thing, if I had to pick, is to really know that faculty are here for them, to help them. And I think I did not feel, or at least, at that time myself felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not, smart enough, or I don't want them to know me. I don't want them to see me, or at least I did not feel like I was ready to approach them until I had some solid things to say or ask about. And I think that's the, fear that I don't think was good, like knowing the faculty are here to help. So don't be scared of asking questions and reaching out to them. With a caveat, which we will go into a little bit later, I guess, be mindful of their time and their sort of like capacity as well. So you definitely don't want to be a burden or become anything like, you know, more than what you want to be. But I think knowing that faculty are here, and sometimes I feel like this might be a little childlike analogy, but like think that you're going to build your academic family. So like the family that you're born into, you have a mom and a sibling. I mean, you have your parents, I'm sorry, correct my language. You have a parent and like siblings or cousins or relatives. This is your academic family that you're building. So you need to feel comfortable and you need to know that you can reach out to them. There are people that can be here to help. Mhm. I'll save some others for later.
I would piggyback off of that. It's a difficult thing to answer with one. I just think being open. I think of this notion of inquiry, right? You may come in with an idea of this is where it's going to take you, but you may not end up there. And that is okay. And in some ways, it's something to celebrate because as you come in and take classes, or you're in education and you go to take classes in another college, right? You're open to new possibilities. And so certainly your third or fourth year, you don't want to be open, to 17 different possibilities for your dissertation. But when you first come in, there's something really exciting about the doctoral journey that has you think about the world in different ways that I don't know I've replicated since then, since the beginning of my time as a doctoral student. So embrace that. And you don't have to have the answers. And if you have more questions after your first year than answers, I think you're doing great. So
Thank you
And
very
that was
much.
my second bullet. So like, we are on the really same page here.
Thank you all very much. These were some powerful advices, especially for those who are just starting off. Especially the first year or the first semester is filled with uncertainty. So thank you very much. So moving on to the second question here. So graduate school can feel isolating. So what strategies do you recommend for students to stay motivated and connected to their why throughout the journey?
Do you want us to sort of stay more or less the same order, or
Whatever works for you. That's fine. Yeah.
I guess sort of piggybacking on something Dr. Black said, I think the idea that graduate school is isolating might be more of a new phenomenon. I never felt more connected and more in community than when I was in graduate school. And I think you all are operating in a completely different context, especially post-COVID, where we've all sort of retreated to these private spaces. And perhaps I'm revealing sort of a generational gap, but I think you need to find each other in real physical spaces again. I think you need to start, I was part of a lab where we were in a big open space. We each had our computer terminal and we sat next to each other at lunchtime. We would talk about things. We didn't have to plan our conversations, our discussions. Things would just come up in the daily process of being in a community of people who wanted to do science together. And I am all for technology. I think it's wonderful that it has allowed us to come together here from all different places. But there's something about the everyday conversation you have as you work through a problem and you turn to your lab partner and say, I'm struggling with this. What, any ideas? You don't have to set up a meeting. You wouldn't even think that that's worthy of setting up a meeting, but it's definitely worthy of conversation and discussion. And I think finding the spaces to do this is important. And I find myself missing it in this new era. I mean, I'm here in a completely empty building right now. I think you guys should find structured ways of coming together in person.
Thank you very much.
I think I can just go on and sort of like use my analogy as a family one more time. I do agree, like this, like getting together to know each other and finding your people. And that could be your peer group, that could be some faculty members. And I think finding good mentor, and that mentor doesn't always necessarily have to be a major professor. Sometimes it could be two different people, or like many different people, many different mentors for different needs. So really finding the group and sometimes I think a little bit outside of USF or your particular program. When I was reading this question, feeling isolated, another thing that I thought of is like that sort of like self-doubt that you give yourself. Am I, smart enough, or do I know enough to say something? Or what is the field, each of your disciplinary field? So maybe identifying a few like key professional organizations that you join to get the feel of the field, to kind of like get to know and kind of like see the landscape, and then get yourself a little more involved. I think sometimes, and going back to what Dr. Carlos was saying, I think there has been some shift in the expectations. At least I didn't feel the pressure that I need to go publish and present like day one, or like do something so much in my doctoral degree. At least I feel like I was given about a year or so to just get acclimated. There is a cultural shift in graduate school. And I mean, not the language or culture are like vastly different, but graduate school has a very unique sort of unspoken norms in terms of, how you should operate, or, what's expected of you. It's not like a business world. It's not like the school, K-12 school, or any, places. So just get yourself acclimated. So don't feel like you have to do something so great like day one, the first semester, but get the feel for the thing, whether it's like in-house or out in the professional level, and then get yourself just like involved a little bit. I appreciate people like today, for example, just like coming to listen. What are people doing? What are they talking about? And what opportunities are there? And I think that is actually worth so much more time than you think, because sometimes it might not feel like it's a good use of your time. But I think I'll guarantee, I guess I can almost guarantee every single bit of experiences do count.
Thank you.
That's the nice thing and the challenging thing about going third. I can just say yes, what they said. But I do, yes. So I also think of writing groups, right? This relates to what goes on, or thinking groups that have regular structured times you meet become important. I think these sort of circles of networks, right? Like we had said, they don't have to be in your department or program, right? That's why the grad student council, what you're doing is important for me, right? To see what you're doing and get together. Professional organizations, many now do mentoring for graduate students or graduate student councils in education. AERA, most of the special interest groups want a graduate student representative. Volunteer for that. That's another network of folks you have. And then and it's different for everybody, right? But what's nice about, for me, a place like Tampa, we're not sitting in smaller college towns. There are other networks of people, right? And so you can get involved with them as well. Maybe you like running and there's a running group, or salsa dancing group, or whatever the case is. And that's something, if you have, I think, significant others, family members, making sure you have time with them, doing activities with others beyond just your academic life becomes very important as you go forward. So cultivate those networks, and I fully agree that sitting in a room with the opportunities for that interaction and things that pop up and structuring that is very helpful as well.
I really appreciate the those ideas about community and purpose. That's really helpful and to balance and makes us stay motivated and connected. So moving on to the next question. Could you describe what each year of the doctoral journey typically looks like? What are the key milestones from year 1 to year 5, if that's the time frame we want to set? And what are the most common reasons students go beyond the 5-year mark, if they do? So, what can students do early to stay on track or maybe finish earlier?
So should we tackle both of these?
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever makes you, yeah.
So I think the first year of the program, I mean, I think of graduate school as, and graduate work, sort of the things that the program dictates for you are sort of the minimal necessary pieces you need to learn to become an expert on something. You need to take those things and teach yourself to become an expert on something. Some of that you'll do with your major professor, but a lot of what I think needs to happen in the first couple of years is sort of taking in those tools that the program is giving you to shape yourself into an expert, and to try to figure out, especially during that first year, what your big question is. Not your specific research question for your dissertation or for a paper, but if you had to come up with sort of a big umbrella question that might carry you for several years after you finish your PhD and into your first few years as an assistant professor, the kind of research, the kind of question that will define a program of research. And that is somewhat broad. It's a broad question, but you need to sort of find how it will anchor you, how it will direct your attention towards readings, towards people, towards events. And once you've sort of found that big question, then, you know, years 3 through 5 are then about really narrowing it down and getting into what your actual dissertation question will be. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that the doctoral program is giving you some minimal requirements, and you need to bring so much more on your own. If you only do what your program says, you won't be in a position to apply for academic positions. And more importantly, what you want to be able to do at the end of your 5th year as you finish your dissertation is to say, this is who I am as a scientist, this is my program of research, and this is how it's going to direct me for the next 5 years. If you can say that at a job interview, you will be solidly considered because you have an idea of where you're going. So during those first couple of years, it's taking in what the program is and coming up with that big question. But then years 3, 4, and 5, it's about figuring out what you're going to put together yourself to develop that expertise in that particular area that motivates you to do this work every single day. So I would say that's part of it. I think the reasons that keep students back sometimes, I think both problems happen. People define their question too early and it's too narrow a question, and then they realize they can't carry it out in the way they had planned, so they need to start over again. So that's one problem. But then the other problem is not defining sort of what their interests are until too late, or expecting the doctoral program to sort of spark that curiosity, and that needs to come from you. You need to define what your path towards expertise is going to be, and what are the experiences that are going to sort of pave that path.
Yes.
That's it. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Black, do you want to take this for a second turn, or do you want me to go?
I am fine either way.
Well, this round I'll just go. Maybe next turn we can switch orders if
Okay.
that's better. I think I agree with this, approach Dr. Carlos mentioned. Like the first couple of years, try to see if you can broaden yourself a little bit, broaden your perspective. And I think Dr. Black also mentioned, know that your research interest could shift, or it's probably better that you do shift a little bit, so that means that you're taking on and learning and growing. And I mean, things you want to be open-minded. So I think first year to, again, broaden your expertise, academic interests, know that you want to connect with faculty members, as many faculty members as you possibly can. So I think one of maybe a concrete advice is try to take courses that interest you with people that you don't know very well. Some of you might be coming to a program thinking, oh, this is my area of expertise, and I know that this is Dr. So-and-so's work, and you only take the classes with that person for how many semesters, and that means you are missing out the opportunities of knowing other people or connecting with other faculty. And again, not just in the College of Ed, but College of Child and Family Studies and some other areas as well, based on your individual discipline. And then sort of like using that foundation to narrow down what your area of interest is, including your cognate, if you're adding that one, and finding more ways to connect with some of the smaller, sort of a specific, interest that you are going to find. And I do agree, doing a minimum, and also in the doctoral program, oftentimes a letter grade that you earn in a course really matters very little. I mean, you don't want to fail the course for sure, but like fighting for a grade here and there is really almost not necessary at all. It really is about what are you getting out from that course? What relationship have you built with that faculty? And what does that do for you? So I think taking that perspective might be a little helpful. And so the last part about why, I mean, there could be multiple whys, right? And some of these are real emergent situations that, the life, brings you to out of nowhere, and you can't do anything with it. There are times that you have to handle your personal emergencies or family matters and other things. But one of the reasons I think, Dr. Carlos kind of gave a good sort of two options. It's your dissertation topic. And I remember seeing this in a little cartoon clip that doctoral student sort of was frustrated. Oh, my major professor gives me different advice every time I see him or her. And guess what? That is happening because we don't know what you're wanting to do. So as a faculty, we try to give you advice, maybe this, maybe that, and maybe that. And sort of that is again, a recipe for disaster, right? You feel like you don't know what to do. And as a faculty, it's also as difficult to kind of give you quality or authentic, real helpful feedback when your interest is shifting all the way through. So I think finding that reasonable scope, and sometimes doctoral students, we tell them this is not your life long-term Nobel Prize winning project. You will have many more years to come and to achieve your long-term big grand goal, but think about your dissertation as one sort of piece where you can really demonstrate your ability to be an independent researcher and take advantage of the people that are here for you. So thinking that realistic step, I think would be a good thing to not to overwhelm you too much and put yourself behind schedule than what you had originally wanted to achieve.
So Dr. Han reminded me of one of my course experiences where the professors like, to get an A, you need to do this extra project. And I had a very busy semester and I was getting a lot out of my other classes. And I just said, no, I'm just going to get a B. And then the professor emailed me back. It's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And it's made zero difference, right, in my career, in my life. So, uh, um, you know, so the first couple years, again, you're experimenting, you're looking. I think you're getting a field for, you're being socialized into, I mean, think about the term we use, a discipline, right? You're being disciplined in the broader sense of it, right? And so I think you start to know what are the major themes, areas of research. By your third year, you want to know what are your professional organizations. Maybe you've gone and you're a graduate student for this ARA SIG. You've gone to a conference or two. You know other people in the field. You want to be known if you go out, right? That people know you in some level. I'm not saying, writ large, but you do want to be, you want to know your field, right? So I think that becomes important. And as you go forward, you also want to make efforts to know people in your college, but other professors like to meet students from other universities as well. So don't feel shy about that as you go forward and have a conversation with people after a presentation at a conference or whatever the case may be. I think again, you almost start you. So I've seen some people may start narrow. I want to study X or Y. Then they discover new things and they go broad, and then you start to narrow a little bit more. So by the time you finish you may know a lot about the field, right? And you want to have enough exposure to know your discipline, to be able to react to it, to know the literature, right? You will have more time to read the literature than I had more time as a doctoral student than I've ever had as a professor. I'll just put it that way, to kind of immerse yourself because of the process. And so you know that, which will be helpful as you leave and go forward, because then, oh, I know they're talking about reform. I remember this classic piece by David Tyack on reform. I can cite it as I go forward. So that's part of what you do as you get further along. And in the end, you are so narrow, but the moment a certain slice, the moment you defend your dissertation, you're probably the expert in the world on that particular aspect of that particular problem for that particular moment, right? I'm not saying overall, but that's what our job is. So I see that as that kind of flow as you go through. The other thing related to this, I always think of, you want to look for courses that are in your content area that expand, but it's also people, right? Who teaches the courses matters as well. So there can be times it may not be exactly what I want to look at, but I know Dr. Han is like the best thing since sliced bread, and I really want to take a class with her. And so, I would encourage you to do that. It's interesting, common reasons, again, life happens. Where I was in policy, educational leadership and policy studies, we have a lot of, um, working students that work full time. So where we see a big gap that often happens is those gaps between coursework and the QE, or even more so QE and the proposal. That's where I've seen it. And once the student gets a proposal, then they know they have a roadmap and again, move forward. So I think keeping the habits when you're no longer taking classes. So I would say the students I've had that work full time, so we often had classes on Saturdays. they would tell their families or others or they come in on Saturdays, just like they were doing when they were taking classes, and then they would write on the Saturday. So they kept the habits. I think really important. One of the things to read, this is not about quote unquote brilliance or, it's really the habits of continuing to hone your craft and showing up every day. And, it's a lot more, it's even more fun sometimes to organize the sock drawer than to sit down and write. And so recognize that and just sit down. And even if you don't get anything done that day, at least most of the time you will get a little bit, right? And then just get in the habit of that. So the folks that don't get those habits and stick to those habits would tend to be the ones that don't finish. And of course, there's life, right?
Yes.
And if you have other significant others, you also have to be, I tell students, for a period of time, you kind of have to be selfish. Like I have a relationship with my dissertation that for right now may take precedent over the relationship I have with others for a period of time, because otherwise it won't get done. So that's what I've seen too, right? That you have to sort of prioritize it, and it's a habit. Even going back to Dr. Carlos, first thing, right? Writing is thinking, and if you're not writing, it's even more important at the end to do that.
Yes.
And then to be with community as well in writing.
Thank you very much. That was very, very helpful. From the answers, I can get the sense of the idea that flexibility and structure can coexist in academic life, and that's what we should focus on. Thank you. So let's move on to the next question. So how important is it to start thinking about long-term goals, academic or professional, especially in the early stages? And how can students do that without feeling overwhelmed?
So it's extremely important. I mean, it's extremely important to have a pretty good idea of what you want to do after graduate school, even before you apply to graduate school, right? And especially if you decide to go down the route of a PhD, it's really it's so much work, and it's so all-consuming that unless you want to pursue a career that requires a PhD, I would question whether a PhD is what everyone should do. Like I used to tell my students, you don't need a PhD to be an excellent star teacher who is a leader in his or her field. You need a PhD if you're going to do the things that a PhD trains you to do, which is to do perhaps research or to do sort of policy level work, or I don't know, I'm probably defining it a little bit narrowly, but you need to think about what you see yourself doing in the end, and then make that decision even before applying. But early on, thinking about what kind of academic position or industry position would you see yourself in? And remember, like I said, you need to start creating those experiences that will pave the way. You need to start making sure you get them on your vita and on your person. If you want to go the way of industry, if you see yourself doing research and development in ed tech, for example, what kinds of internships do you need to have before you get to that point? What kinds of relationships do you need to forge with industry to be to be competitive for a position down that line? And the same, of course, for an academic position. So I would say you need to start thinking about these your long-term professional plans from day one. And the way to not feel overwhelmed is to start early. Although I would say, welcome the pressure and welcome the stress, because it's what the rest of your life is going to be like. There's, we commit to doing more things than anyone can possibly do. And if you're doing something that you really like, I think the stress is only going to be a motivator. It's just part of life. But you don't want it to overwhelm you, of course. And the only way to avoid becoming overwhelmed is to start very, very early and do, just chip away at all those little things that you need to get on your vita and your repertoire of skills so that you're ready when you finish.
So I think we were going to move it around a little bit. So I think that backwards mapping, like in the why of what you want to do, and then how do you get there, becomes important. I do like this kind of layered strategic mapping. So you may have long term and then midterm and then short term, almost to the point of daily. So one of the things I know I've struggled with, and I'll say I've tried to tell myself, I was working on this last week. It's like, okay, you need to do one thing at a time, right? We have all this going on in our heads, and sometimes even for the writing or whatever, I use the Pomodoro, where it's 25 minutes. I put on the stopwatch. I get a 5-minute break, but I'm only doing this one thing.
Yeah.
And I think almost that layered approach, yes, backward mapping of where I want to do, and that adjusts, right? If you don't hit that, that's fine, right? You have to adjust. And then coming back, and then having very specific goals. And then that's a helpful if you go be an academic, right? People I've seen be successful, they're almost tracking their projects, right? What's in development? What am I writing on? What's been submitted and I'm waiting? What am I revising? So I think there's a similar strategic planning that you can do for yourself for the things you can control, and then come back to what can I control, right? And that's why I like the working on one thing at a time is very helpful, because you can control that period of time. Sometimes you get overwhelmed because there's so much out there and you will never learn everything. And that can be overwhelming, but that's okay. You can learn what you can learn in that 25 minutes, in that hour, and focus on what you can do at that time. That's the what I've been thinking. And I'm thinking about that now, 30 years in almost, that I have to revisit that myself.
So, yes, I can say I agree with everything said so far, right? And I mean, just without duplicating the statements already, it's just absolutely important. And I think the more clear that you have upfront, I think a lot of planning. I'm a fan of planner. I have many like handwritten old notebook planner. I have Excel spreadsheet planner. I have daily to-do list planner. And I think the only way I can survive in a way now, as Dr. Black and Carlo said, we've been doing this for good enough years, but this is sort of ongoing question or dilemma. It's not just stopping after your graduate school.
Yeah.
You always feel like, what do I need to do? And how much time do I have? And what do I prioritize? And I almost always feel overwhelmed all the time. And sometimes actually I doubt myself, what's wrong with me? I never seem to, get things done great, or I always feel like I'm doing I have something more to do than I have actually accomplished, and this is the ongoing thing. So I really think it's planning with long-term, short-term, plan A, plan B, plan C, and again, you probably cannot do it every task that you have, but prioritizing it, and sometimes maybe a little bit of that mindset. It's okay that you're not great in everything that you do. Some things can go, some things can be a little bit lower in your priority list. So a little bit of that both.
I love your answers and how they emphasize the idea of dreaming big and at the same time taking small steady steps to achieve that goal by planning ahead and having a structured plan throughout the journey, which kind of segues to our next section, which is time management in graduate schools. So as a graduate student, sometimes we often juggle coursework, research, teaching, publications, conferences, personal life. And sometimes everything is important to us. All these aspects are just important. So how do you recommend students, or how do you advise us to prioritize when everything feels so important? And maybe
Dr.
we can
Carlos,
shift,
would
yeah, we can shift
maybe
the
can
order
I
now.
take this one? Sort
Yeah,
of
go
like
ahead.
yeah, piggybacking. I think focusing on a specific goal, maybe a little bit different goal each year. So you have to do everything that you mentioned over here, and maybe more than this, is something that is expected of like academic, like academia or faculty, want to do really well on. And we know that I'm not going to be great in my research productivity every single year. There might be some years that I'll have a great year. Some years might be a lot more revise and resubmit multiple rounds, and I'm not as productive. Similar with other like teaching or other things, there might be a year that I'm really strong on one thing and not as strong on the other thing. And that is okay. That is actually perfectly normal. If you aim to achieve everything every time so good, I mean, there's something that you're missing out. I think that's unrealistic expectation. So set different goals each year and just like approach like academic world or this trajectory that we're in is really a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to be done in 1 year and you feel like I'm gone. You want to sustain yourself as well. So I think that really comes down to knowing your style a little bit. This is an ongoing dilemma about writing. Oftentimes you will receive recommendation. Yes, thinking is writing. So, you need to set aside time for that. And there are some like even organizations and things that they're, doing like writing club or writing like, retreat to like book out specific time. And sometimes some people work better in the daily writing. They say that's the first thing that they do in the morning, like wake up in 30 minutes, I sit and like, do whether it's a paragraph or just 2 sentences, whatever you write. Sometimes there are some other people I think that's a little more binge writer, like, and the only way I think binge writing can happen is, although you were probably not writing, there was thinking in process. You cannot just sit down and start writing. I mean, maybe there are some brilliant people who can do that, but most of the times, no, we need time to kind of like think through things before you can actually have some writing there. So again, finding your work style, writing style, what times of the day that you work better in doing different things, like prepping for your teaching, prepping for your, again, other personal things or conferences. So parsing out your time. And I guess one last advice, if I were to give, is you might want to have someone who can be your accountability check person, whether it's your peer or like sometimes it could be a faculty member as well. So like keeping them in the loop. This is what I'm working on. This is sort of my plan for the next whatever due date. And so like having some accountability system so that oh, I've said something, so I need to keep my word. And also you can think about, I need to be respectful of someone else's time because I promised that I'm going to give them a draft for them to review, and they need time to review and give it back to me. So I think that would be my advice about having someone as your check person.
Thank you, Dr. Han. That was my follow-up question. Thank you for answering it. Thank you very much.
I agree with everything that you've said, and I think this idea of backward planning that Dr. Black talked about earlier is what will help you prioritize if you have sort of thought it out from the end and all the way to the present moment. I'll speak to the procrastination and productivity guilt because it's something I've struggled with my entire career. I put off the things that create the most anxiety for me. Writing is one of those things for complex reasons. For one, writing is hard. I don't think it comes easily to anyone. And I think also so much of our identity as students and professors is sort of tied into our writing that it's, you're really putting yourself out there every time you put out a piece of writing, and you want it to be good and you want it to reflect well on you. And then so all of that just builds up to a whole lot of anxiety and procrastination. I've come to convince myself that anytime I'm procrastinating, it's because there's something that produces some anxiety for me and I try to avoid it. And so you have to like figure out what that is and face it and name it and use the right. I mean, we come up with all sorts of excuses for why we don't do the thing that scares us the most and that produces the most anxiety for us. But I just want to sort of share, and I shared this with Khalifa and our class last night. I read a book back in 2003 by the choreographer Twyla Tharp that she wrote a book called The Creativity Habit. And there was one thing she said there that made a huge difference for me because I just sort of translated it to my situation. And she would talk about what allowed her for over 40 years to get into a cab every morning in New York City at 4 a.m. to go and do her version of writing, which is choreographing, right? And creating dances for the Joffrey Ballet and American Ballet Theater. And she would say that the thing that allowed her to do that was that call to the cab every morning, that the ritual of choreographing and everything that came after it was like settled the moment she called that cab. And so, it sort of was part of the ritual. And when that first step in the ritual got accomplished, then everything else sort of followed from there. And for me, that first step is opening the file. Just like sit at my computer and open the file. And I was telling Khalifa this and the rest of the class last night. Once I realized that that was the first step in the ritual for me, opening the file. If I was avoiding opening the file, I was in trouble. If I opened the file, something would happen. It might not be my best writing day. It might be just a little bit, but nothing would happen if I didn't open the file. Something would happen if I opened the file. So I'll leave you with that. Find what your minimum sort of action in the ritual is and see if you can sort of master that little step, and it might open up all sorts of possibilities for you after that.
So it's difficult to go after my colleagues who have such insight. I think rituals are really important, right? In ways where you don't have to think, but you just do it. I had a good friend who's now chair of history at University of South Carolina come visit this weekend. He had a conference and we were laughing about he had this one seat in the Latin American Studies Library at University of Texas that like people almost said that was his seat, right? And he would go back occasionally and it's like someone said, but that was his ritual, right? And that was really important that he just shows up. So half the battle literally is showing up. And that's the ritual that then creates these other habits. I was also thinking about again, the strategizing, mapping, planning is important at that cognitive level, but also, again, the habits, the rituals where you don't have to think about it, right? Because you don't have as much cognitive overload. It's nothing you have to think about. You just start. And then I also think about advice I had from one of my co-chairs was, I remember him with this Boston accent, just say, I'm not going to replicate it, but he says, I love getting a rejection. It's like, why? Well, then I can figure out what I can do next and resubmit it. And I've thought about that the entire time, right? You get to the point where my first rejection was like horrible, right? And now, okay, I'm going to live. So you take some of that as kind of a learning experience, and then you go to with all these things. I always think of like Frozen, right? You just got to let it go. So you think about it, sing the song "Let It Go," and you let it go. And then the other thing with all these things that are happening in productivity, and I see a theme through all of us. It won't go away. This guilt, this productivity. I mean, I have a son with very significant disabilities, and there's not a week that goes by that I say, I'm not doing enough for him. And I'm not doing enough for my job, and I'm not doing enough for the students. So it will flow in, it will be there, and sort of almost one of the gifts is sort of accepting that it'll be there, acknowledging it, and then get back to your rituals and your planning, but do enough to acknowledge that it's there. And so that won't go away. It won't, you're always balancing it. So don't think it's wrong, unnatural, almost live with it, right? Recognize it. And you then, after you recognize it, go back to your plans, your rituals, figure out what's important. And sometimes you have to stop. That day, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because you've got to do something else, and that's okay. And then the next day you restart. And the sun still rises the next day, and you can open that file on your computer the next day instead of today, and allow yourself to do that. Be kind to yourself with that.
Thank you all for your answers. Especially the ideas of self-compassion and setting realistic goals. That's really important and inspiring. Which takes me to my next question here. Many students, well, myself included, we struggle with perfectionism. We want everything to be perfect, everything to be spot on. And so when do I know if something is perfect or just good enough? So how do I find the balance between striving to achieve what's perceived to be perfect, or I should leave it as is, it's good enough that way?
I'll just jump in to change the order real
Please do.
quickly.
Please do.
Because I just said, my professor had said it's okay to get a rejection. I don't think you'll know necessarily. So that's the first thing. Don't be such a perfectionist to know that you'll perfectly know what's good enough and what's perfect, right? So I think that's the first piece of that. I think what we've heard before, having a critical friend, just another set of eyes that looks at it, can be helpful. Having waiting a day, like any writing, right? If you feel like it, just wait overnight. That's why planning early enough where, so what do procrastinators typically do? They're so anxious, they wait. It's due tomorrow at 10 o'clock. You start writing at 10 o'clock the night before because you've been so anxious along the way. You figured by the time you submit it, you will have done the very best you could have for that project. At least I've seen it with someone I know. That then that's as good as you could be. Start earlier, have a critical friend, and then it's like the revision process in journals. Hardly ever do you get it accepted the first time you submit. So just it sort of separate that process a little bit from you as a person, right? You are a good person doing the best you can, and this is part of the learning process. And it doesn't mean you can't do well. I still remember my very first presentation at ARA, and it was very crowded because at that time I was with David Berliner, and they'd come out with this huge critique of accountability policy, and there was everybody else and me, the second-year doctoral student. And at the end of the presentation, the discussant said, this is literally what they said, "That was interesting." And that's it. So, not necessarily the best, right? But there were some really nice ideas that came out of writing that then informed my dissertation later on. So yeah, I still remember it, but you know what? It was good enough to be at ARA and good enough to then inform the next steps of my journey.
Thank you.
You've activated such a nice memory of Dave Berliner. I remember being in a couple of sessions that he gave and always thinking, just leaving the session feeling like I had learned so much. I didn't know him personally, but I really enjoyed him. So what a nice memory. Yeah, I guess I'm just going to sort of go back to the Let It Go. I haven't seen Frozen, which is unbelievable because I have 4 nieces that want me to. So I haven't watched it, but I imagine Letting It Go might be related to also, with this thing that you're worried is not perfect. You won't know, and as Dr. Black was saying, until you let the world sort of give you feedback and your colleagues give you feedback. And this is really, our craft is a craft that's done in community. We do a lot of work on our own, but it doesn't really congeal until you get feedback from others. And that's when you'll know when it's good enough. And it will never be perfect. And even if it's perfect on one day, tomorrow there will be new information that will make it obsolete. So.
Sure. I think I think Dr. Black said a lot of he has provided a lot of great insight. I think I don't have a lot to add. Just maybe 2 things. I see good enough is dependent upon. It's like a child development. You need to understand if a 3-year-old can do something like this, that's fantastic. From an 8-year-old's perspective, that's like, shoot, that's nothing. And I think this is like a step-by-step sort of progression. There is never a day that I mean, maybe it's exaggerated, but usually you never feel like, oh, I'm great. I don't feel that very often. The more opposite happens a lot, like, am I good enough? Am I doing a great job? Am I ready to do something? There's that always, self-questioning. And I think that is a good thing. I want to say that is a good thing, that we are being reflective of, what our strengths are and weaknesses are, and finding rooms to improve, and not to really, again, like, get stuck with that, whatever that letter grade or whatever that the editor said, or, whatever that one person, did or said to me. So holistically, like, you're moving towards something that is always a good enough movement to, take one step forward. I think some brilliant person said something like, we're moving a needle. And so when I'm moving a needle, nobody's going to see it, or even myself would not even know what I'm doing at times, but we are moving a needle. So every project takes one little bit of something to move forward. And how do we help? I think this is just me personal. I like journaling. As I said, I like planning. I have multiple planners and journaling, record keeping, and I like it. And that is because just it keeps me in check. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And so what I'm finding is I know what is the thing that I'm dreading the most, that I don't like the most, or I hate the most. I find, I guess I need more help from outside. Sometimes external forces, even nowadays, I feel like I need them, like somebody telling me, this is your due date. This is when you have to submit something, or this is like when things are going to close, or like whatever. So times I think knowing what your weaknesses is, and sometimes again using some external folks or people system to help me that you need to keep this due date. So put the best you can by this time, date and time. And that's a little more, I guess, self-surviving strategy, I guess, for me.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Listening to all your amazing answers, I am left with one takeaway: progress over perfection. So that's what I came up with, and that, thank you very much. That was very insightful. So to the next question: are there particular systems, tools, or routines that you've seen students use, or that you would suggest that student would use and successfully implement? And on the other hand, which time management strategies tend to fail?
So maybe because I only have so much, I guess, the systems and tools and routines, again, I think whatever works for you, whether it's a visual spreadsheet or handwritten color-coded notes or stickies or whatever, just for me, that works. That seems to be working for me to, keep myself moving forward, and knowing like how many projects are going at this time and what stages they are at this time, and what is my priority for this week. What is something that possibly, if I don't get it this week, that can wait for another week or so. So like having that big sort of like, visual like things chart that works for me, and always try to build in some time for emergencies, wiggle rooms. There are times, yes. And then as Dr. Black mentioned a little bit about his personal experiences, for me, I am a working mom with 2 kids. Now they're a little bit older, but I remember like in my tenure earning years, or actually starting from graduate school, I was a mother of a child and looking for a job, like getting a faculty position, working through my tenure processes. It is a nonstop juggling act, and you don't know when your child is going to get sick. I mean, that's not in my planner, but it happens. So you have to, build in time for that emergent situations, and be as just, you can only do as much as you can at some times, and giving yourself some grace. I think that is something that we all have to, be mindful. Graduate students, faculty, we're all human beings, people. There's going to be some good days and bad days, and that's okay. I want to just like point out one thing, which might be the answer. On the other hand, what was some unsuccessful strategies is like stopping the communication, because I'm so stressed and I'm so stuck and I don't know what to do. I'm not going to let anyone know what I'm struggling with. And so from a faculty side, sometimes you have doctoral students who's sort of like going MIA for a month, and I don't know what's happening. And all of a sudden, sometimes they bring in something and say, hey, can you give me feedback by next week? Or something like that. That chain of communication, when it's so abruptly stopping or abruptly coming back, that sometimes throws a little hard, like, issues on both ends, I think. So I think regardless of where you are, and it's okay that if you're struggling or if you're stuck, but keeping that communication going, I think would be a strategy to, stopping the communication is a strategy to avoid.
I just want to second that. I think that is a recipe for disaster when that happens. So important. Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah.
Third here as well, that communication, which is linked to perfectionism often, right? I'm not going, I can't do it. As a professor, I'd much rather hear from you and even just say, look, this is where I am, or this week this happened and I didn't, and that's fine, right? So I think some of the systems, tools, routines, we've talked about that. Planning, those things that are harder but get it done. I think a routine also of sometimes crafting in a way that it's a little victory, something you check off. You know, oh, I did finish that page, or I finished that concluding paragraph. Uh, and I feel better and recognize that you've done that, right? So a ritual of recognition, I think, can be very helpful. Um, the, time management, some people had done very well as undergraduates where they could stay up all night, study, and do well. The graduate doctoral journey is very different, right? This isn't a sprint, the usual metaphor, it's a marathon, and it's usually just plugging away at it. So it's when people wait and, oh, I'm going to wait until the last minute and I know I can push through because I did that successfully. When you're 19 and you can stay up all night, well, it just doesn't work that way as well for doctoral programs. So I've seen that fail. And then not, it sounds odd as a time management strategy, but I think keeping yourself healthy is another important time management. So for me, what's been helpful is to go out, go for a run or a walk or a bike ride, and I actually can get some good thinking done while I do that. And then that actually makes me more productive when I come back. So even though you're taking time away, if you are refilling yourself, and for me, sort of physical activity helps, or there can be other things that people have as their rituals, connecting with people, or people like games or things that occupy their minds and keep them away, that is actually part of time management as well, to sort of plan those things in.
Thank you very much. From the answers, again, one main takeaway is to set realistic goals, of course, and adding to that, taking a physical and mental break from what you're doing. Leave it, go away, come back. The way you will be more productive and more, you will achieve more. So now moving on to the third section of this discussion, building relationship with faculty and advisors. For this part, advisor relationships often develop naturally, or let's say organically over time, through coursework and interactions. How can students be intentional about building the relationship into a strong mentorship? And what kinds of conversations help establish mutual expectations without um, failing or without having that relationship pulled apart?
I'll just start very quickly because I know my
Please.
colleagues will be more brilliant than I am on this one, I think. I think what's different to what Dr. Carlo had said is you have to also manage your own journey. So not waiting for the faculty member to always tell you, oh, this is what you do. So you sometimes have to come in, or this is what I've been thinking about, or this is what I'm doing. So being proactive, which goes back to the communications piece, right?
Yes.
Being consistent in your communication. I think that can be very helpful as well. And then conversations where um, you can kind of ask about both content but process, right? So you're clear about the process between the two of you or three of you if you have co-majors. And so I think that can be very, very healthy as well. And I think the mutual expectations, we talk about content, but also those, what I liked, I had co-majors, and I had one that I was really much more my academic mentor. So we would talk about these concepts or these policy issues. And the other one we do some, but really about socialization and the process. So I think you can talk about both of those, right? Sort of peel back the curtain of what happens in academia, et cetera, conferences, which ones to go to, but also content. So I think just and you would know. I mean, I think for me on the other side, sort of honest questions that really kind of you're wondering about on both of those umbrellas can be helpful.
I think there are like 3 slides. I believe there were similar questions about relationships. And one of my sort of like recurring theme, I think, is really is the word respect. And I want to, preface this. This is something, if since I'm talking to, like, let's say the primary audience here is like graduate students, so I'm going to be talking a little about, how we need to be respectful of faculty. It's the same thing around. If we ever have this conversation amongst faculty, we have to be thinking about how can we be respectful of our doctoral students. So I think respect is really this, bi-directional piece. And so building relationship, I think the fundamental is we want to be respectful. And so I guess to offer maybe a little concrete way is like, as a doctoral student, open communication. We want to hear from you about your sort of like goals, your career goals. What do you want to do? Like, are you looking for a faculty position, or are you thinking about some other professional career path? Is like, especially I see some of you are also coming from international background. So are you actually planning to, go back to wherever your home country is and, build your career there? Or are you looking for, a career path in the United States or in maybe other parts of the world? And so like knowing your trajectories, knowing your boundaries, I think those are, also very helpful. I mean, some like very concrete examples we also had like during like COVID or other post-COVID, when many of our graduate courses are offered online, and some of our international students, they were only allowed to take so many like online courses because their funding agencies or other, there were other restrictions that they had to comply with. And so I know these are very specific, like, I guess, minute concrete examples, but knowing your needs is what we can better support you or best support you. And I think that is one of the fundamentals of like relationship building. I want to know who you are, what you need, how can I help you, and taking it from there. And maybe so vice versa ask is, we also want students to do a little homework before reaching out to faculty for like every small thing. Sometimes, hey, I need this from you. I need this from you. Or, in a very short time frame. Sometimes it's a little challenging for us. And I don't sometimes fully understand what is this letter for? I cannot just like randomly write a letter that students need to do this or need that, but we would also appreciate a little, I guess, proactive communication about what the needs are and what the circumstances are. And I guess, trust me, when faculty know what the needs are, we're more likely to be helpful. We want to be helpful. We all have been in your shoe at one point, so we know what those challenges are. I mean, to a certain degree, not everything. But so I think that idea of like, proactive communication and having that foundational trust and like respect, I think would be a good starting point for this one.
Thank you.
I think one thing that has always impressed me over the years, I think there's a group of faculty who are very good at advising students who they don't necessarily study the same things or are doing research in the same area, but there's something about they're very comfortable in that sort of outside perspective and are very effective advisors in that role. And then there's another group that I think I belong to. I find myself that I'm most effective when I'm most effective when students are doing work that's very closely related to the stuff I'm doing. And we end up working on my data and developing like their own project out of that. And it just sort of, from that common interest comes a mutually beneficial relationship. We end up depending on each other. I have one doctoral student right now. I depend on her, perhaps more than she depends on me. But it all comes from, we have this common interest, and anytime she's at a talk and hears something that's related to our work, she'll write to me, and vice versa. Like, there's this constant communication that just comes from having a similar interest, a similar perspective on things. And so see if you can sort of find people that you with whom you share things. But I think there's also lots of faculty who are very good about sort of giving that outside perspective. That ideally you'd have both people, but if I mean, one thing that you can do is work on the projects that your advisor is working on. Find a way to collaborate on something so that you both think of a paper that you think you could work on together, and get sort of that common set of goals, a common set of perspectives going. And I think there's going to be a lot of natural communication that's just going to come from that.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Again, my personal takeaway from this is communication is key. And of course, respectful communication is key. And I remember when I sat down with my advisor, and we were discussing, just building on to what you just said, Dr. Han, we were discussing the courses, and he was shocked when I told him that my sponsor doesn't really accept online courses. I cannot take any online courses. And that was just a surprise to my advisor, but we maneuvered our way around it. So yes, communication is key. Thank you very much. So beyond the advisor, what other faculty relationships are critical for doctoral success? How can students strategically build their community and a broader network? And when should they start doing this?
Maybe as soon as possible. and something like this, I think you guys are doing a great job of like having different series of like events, inviting different like faculty members, from very different like discipline, or even outside the college as well, right? I think this is a prime opportunity. Just like search out, look out for opportunities, whether they are doing open lectures, or are there any speaker series, or whatever events that you can just like see who they are or hear how they talk. I think, having someone on a piece, reading someone's like profile on a piece of paper and like thinking, oh my gosh, this person's doing great, or they're doing XYZ research, or, they're really prolific in whatever grant funding. You can see someone on a piece of paper. I guess you can see someone on social media too, but like actually having that, real person feel, I think will give people a better idea about who they are and what they do and how do they do things. And I think I know Dr. Black probably mentioned this prior too. There's some faculty that you would find a better goodness of fit, not because of the expertise, but because of their human personality. And I think that is also a significant part of your success. To me, because of my maybe training of, being an early childhood educator, I really, think it's an important piece. I tell students, like, young kids are not going to learn from you unless they feel like you care for them first. They don't care what the degree you have, or, what papers you write. It's not that I understand it's not the same like population, but whether it's a 20-year-old undergraduate students or a little bit more like mature doctoral students, I think that level of like, care and trusting relationship, I think trumps than things that, what intellectual like brain can do. So comparing or balancing that idea, if you're thinking about who your major professors has to be or who other committee members that you feel like would be a good fit. And well, you could also have additional mentor outside of your committee members. So that's not a confined like rule that you only have to work with these people. But I guess to me, like search out for opportunities and, look for faculty that fits beyond the content expertise.
And so I'm going to put a plug for our research center here at Right Path Research and Innovation Center. We have folks who are psychometricians, math education, math learning, disability, bilingualism. Like if any of these things intersect with what you do, look to this side of campus too. And we're always looking for opportunities to interact with folks from the College of Ed. So Right Path Research and Innovation Center in the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences.
I'll second that as well. One of the interesting things when I came here, and I'll say it's a little bit different, and I think we're moving in a different direction, but my doctoral work, I had to take 5 classes outside of the College of Education. That was a requirement of my program. In many ways, our programs in education are not nearly as expansive in that way. And I think we want to move more in that direction. So like Dr. Carlo said, there's great opportunities to network with people. I've had, our doctoral students go to communication, to anthropology, to business. And we encourage them to look for classes or experiences outside the college but it kind of depends on the program of study. Some programs have more flexibility than others, but that's something in my new role I want to continue to encourage as we go forward. Your committee members, again, if you go to national conferences, you volunteer. People love free doctoral labor, student labor, often on these committees, and they're looking for committee people, graduate representatives. I was talking about ARA SIGs, your professionals organizations do that. And as you present or do things, you get to know folks. You can also work with your committee members and major professor to add someone from outside of USF onto your doctoral committee. There's a credentialing process. It's not a hard process, and it expands your network and perspective. And then look for the other members. Always go through your major professor, and then there are different models, right? I almost call it the strong major professor model, where everything runs through the major professor, and there's a more distributed model, where there's really significant input from the different committee members. Get to know what the sort of the layout and the preference of your chair would be. And again, it depends on programs very much, right? My program is rather broad, so it's a different take on it. But other committee members, you choose them for their expertise as well, right? So you can have conversations with them, ask them questions related to what they can contribute to your journey as well. So don't be shy about doing that. And again, I would say get to know a few people before you make the full decision on that, right? Because you may get exposed to someone in the first semester and you think they're great, and then your second semester they're great, third semester they're great, and they can be great in different ways. So you want some exposure, I would say, before you make all of your decisions.
I can personally relate to that. That's exactly what's happening to me. Everybody is just great in their own unique ways. And the next question, let me rephrase this question. So sometimes students may feel that they need more structure and support from their advisor. What should they do in this situation? How can we approach that conversation productively?
Go ahead.
Oh, I actually want to just make sure I understood the prompt
Yes.
correctly, because the way I interpret it is, what if you feel like you are not receiving well enough or structured guidance from your major professor or your advisor? What
Right.
should I do, or how should I approach the situation? Is that the question is about?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Again, I feel like communication, and then again, very, in some ways, careful and respectful communication. And I know I mean, I know Dr. Carlos, but I don't know as much of her workload in comparison to Dr. Black. So I'm going to use him as an example, right? I mean, he is a super busy person. I know that he's got so many like things on his plate. He has to oversee all of our graduate programs. So when I reach out to him, I want to be careful about like, am I making, I guess, his life more miserable than I need to? So I guess this is like I just felt like this is a real thing. Sometimes faculty members are just like so busy. It's not that they're intentionally trying to make your life miserable or not wanting to care for you all as doctoral students, but you sometimes, well, honestly, I don't know exactly how much work Dr. Black is doing. I just know a little bit, but I might not know. Same thing I think happens. Oh, come on. So, just like, I guess, start with that idea. Well, I need to just better communicate about what my needs are. And you also want to, again, approach it in a way knowing that they have other things that you might not know. It's just like possible that we don't know what happens in everyone else's life for sure, right? So there's always going to be that idea of like, I guess, just to be safe, be a little more, careful, thoughtful, proactive in communicating. And so I think one thing that, as a concrete example, one of my doctoral students, and she did a phenomenal job, almost like, giving me a semester-long timeline. And she did it in a very professional way. She said, this is just my personal sort of like goals, and I want to keep you in the loop. And so that she has built in some like turnaround time period. I'm going to send this to you on this day, and if you can get back to me in 2 weeks, that will give her like another whatever 2 weeks before the final product is due. And those are some things that are, number one, it's helpful. And I know, Dr. Black, we had this like situation. There are some deadlines for the graduate school or college that we need to have some of those paperwork turned in. And if the students don't get it to me on time, I'm not going to have enough time to circulate it and submit it to the graduate school. So this is like a domino effect. So that building in that timeline, I think, having a timeline, building in that, return timeline is helpful. And also in one particular case, I was able to tell her, you're telling me to give you feedback in these 2 weeks, but these 2 weeks I'm not available. I have like conferences, I'm traveling or whatever that's happening. So if you're counting on me to giving you feedback in this particular frame, I'm sorry, but this is not going to work. So that we have to adjust the schedule a little bit. So I think that's an example from my end about having some of this communication, but also taking a little proactive step about telling or giving. So correct my word, not telling someone to do something for you, or saying that I need it from you is not the best way, right? But having this conversation about what would work best, I guess, is my little 2 cents.
And I think having that communication, having those guidelines as to how often should you expect feedback. 2 weeks is kind of an academic norm for us to expect. And, and occasionally I won't be able to get to that. And then I'll go back to your other question where I'm feeling guilty that I didn't get it back to the student, right? So we feel that too. and then sometimes it comes back earlier. But I always think of everything in just as a beginning point, 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks. I give you some feedback. Then if you can get something back to me in 2 weeks, that's kind of when you say that rhythm, right? I almost think of that as the dance beat, the 2 week dance beat. I think you also want to know before this is why you also want to have classes with people or know how they give feedback, right? Yes, it's different when you're doing doctoral work, but you pick up a lot, right? About how they do feedback. So I would think of that before you go in. Also know yourself, right? How much do you need that? And then how does that fit with different people? Someone's very busy and or they have a lot of students, you may not get that, right? And so you also have to think about, is this not just a good fit? You may say it's a good fit in these ways, but they're very busy and I know my need is someone that gives feedback. So you can also take that into consideration before you go. And then sometimes I think that's that planning and communicating is important. And man, I'm going to date myself. Now I'm going to take a Rolling Stone song. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need, right? So sometimes it's not a perfect relationship, but you got to let go that sometimes you're not going to always get that, but you still communicate so that you are also part of the relationship, keeping people accountable. I always think this is a really strange relationship, right? At some level, because of the inherent power dynamics. You all are adults, yet you come to us in a different way. That's that's odd. I mean, let's just say it's kind of odd because of this power dynamic. Can you please do this? Right? Can you get so there is some of that playing that makes it a little bit uncomfortable, but you also, I mean, it's an accountability dance as well. Like I put this forward and you do that, and 90% of people will respond. And if they really are bad and they're not, and that happens with multiple students, I should know as the associate dean. So
Thank you.
I just want to second that, and especially that it's that accountability. You will get back also in the measure that you're putting in effort, and I think that like no one is going to care about your progress more than you. You are the person who cares the most about this, and people will meet you at your level of engagement and interest. So you need to sort of show that too, I think, so that people rise to where you need them to be. And I think most faculty will meet a student who's very engaged in their progress. And
Thank you. That's very insightful, and it's really important for us as students to know these expectations. Like we have 2 weeks academic response period, for example, and that faculty members and advisors especially are busy with many things. So that's really good. Thank you very much. So before we move to the Q&A session, how do you define thriving in graduate schools beyond surviving? And another question, share one quick tip you would give a new student on day one. And this is going back to what you discussed with me, Dr. Carlo, in the class, the elevator's pitch. So this has reminded me of that. So please. Whoever wants to go first.
I mean, what I told Khalifa about the elevator pitch was, I think this is a little cliche at this point, but perhaps worth repeating. Like, you need to understand your interest well enough that you can sort of summarize it in a very brief moment, that perhaps the moment it takes you to get from floor 1 to floor 3 with that person. Giving them, they ask you, what kind of work do you do? You've sort of internalized an idea of what you're about. And you can do it quickly enough so that you cause sort of curiosity about what you're doing and you impress people with what you're doing. So yeah, the elevator pitch was one of those. People are not going to sit there and wait for you to sort of free associate for very long. You need to engage them quickly, and working on that and honing what that elevator pitch is probably worth your time.
I think thriving also has to do like you're still interested and curious, right? These things get you curious, and it's almost hard to stay on the one or two things that keep you curious, right? And that's almost a form of thriving because, you're doing this now, but I remember, and this is a quick tip again, one of my mentors is like saying why I should become a professor. He's like, you can do this stuff, get into it, and then in 5 years, there may be something related but different, and you're able to do that because you've got these inquiry skills to be able to do that. And so, you're interested in it, but it's never going to totally define you. So that's okay because, and you may build a career where you become known as the person for, I don't know, trust in organizations, right? I know somebody does, and you build off of that, but you could still do different variants or collaborate with other people and learn something different around it. So that's another thing. Build your skills of curiosity, inquiry, and writing, and then you can thrive in grad school, but then also beyond.
Thank you.
Wonderfully said. I don't know how else I can say that. It's hard. This is like the first and last questions are hard. I guess that was intentional, right? The just immerse yourself into the graduate school experience and take it in as much as you can. Doctoral dissertation work, for example, you have like at least like four members of your committee giving you feedback, and sometimes you might be a little, frustrated because they seem to be asking a lot of you, like do this, do that, revise this, revise that. But take advantage of that. People with you who are there to support your work and help you become the best you can, because thereafter, when you're done with your dissertation, you don't have a committee member that helps you with your project, your writing. I mean, you have collaborating people, definitely you will have collaborators, but the structure that is built in the graduate school, allowing you to explore a few years and then have a committee to help you identify like your particular niche of your research and going through that whole process. I think take advantage of the opportunities, people, relationships, and like, I guess, take one thing at a time, one step every day. And this is something that you've invested your time and life into this work, right? And so take advantage of all the people around you to make the best out of your experiences. This is a hard question, so I'm good, I'm done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. And now to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or just drop them in the chat and I'll read the questions to our panelists. Yes, sir. So I have a question from Rachel. If I could change something about the PhD process, what would it be and why? Dr. Han, you're muted.
Okay. Okay. So I guess the question is about the current USF PhD process, right?
Rachel?
Yeah, or just in general, just like the way that the PhD process is set up. Like you take coursework and then you do your qualifying exam, and then you do the dissertation.
Sure, sure. I think one of the things that I'm reflecting on as a faculty is our, and this is USF specifically, but maybe a little bit in a broader sense too, is geared towards training future academics in higher education institutions in most cases. And I think many more doctoral students that we see often wants to venture into different fields, not necessarily becoming a faculty member at a university. And so broadening that sort of like platform, or even like allowing students to explore different, routes out there after graduating. I think that is something that all PhD programs can do a little better job, like doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Catherine, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. It's just a quick comment. I wasn't able to join in for the whole meeting. I'm also joining from my phone from time to time, but I just want to say that spaces like this are very helpful. I'm in my fourth year, and I really wish this had been going on when I first got here. It would have been extremely helpful for me. I'm pretty sure that my doctoral process would have been different, maybe, if I had access to some resources like this. I also really appreciate what the college is doing with the newsletters. It seems like there's a lot more of contact with students, and I really, really appreciate that. I became part of a mentoring program in the graduate studies office just because I felt like I needed to give back and hopefully be able to help someone so that they wouldn't make the mistakes that I made or filling some of the gaps. And I want to echo something that was just mentioned, and that is reach out for help. Sometimes as international students, we're kind of hesitant about asking for certain resources. So just, there's a lot of programs like the one that I mentioned. It's called Relatable. And just find someone that maybe has had similar experiences or maybe a similar pathway to you, and they can and they want to help. So yeah, again, just thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much. From Tatiana, do you have some advices regarding how to invite a faculty member to be part of your committee? Is there an appropriate protocol or specific way to make it? How did you find your own committee? Any tips?
Dr. Black, do you want, maybe from
I'll jump in.
associate
So
professor.
you start with your major professor. You really don't want to get other committee members or asking them before your major professor for various reasons, right? You want guidance from your major professor. You want conversations around content. They know other people as well. They may have had other experiences working with other committee members, and you want to have that guidance. And so it's really the first step is you may have ideas and you want to take some classes or go to talks, etc. But you start with your major professor, and then you ask them, and then you can have conversations about what your pathway is, how you may want to design your studies, and then that may lead to whoever else would be on your committee, and that's a negotiated. And again, it depends. The thing that's interesting about this whole process is um, people are different, right? And so that gets negotiated in different ways with different people. And so for me, I always think about, okay, what are you thinking about? Who are some people? Who do I know? May be helpful for you with that. Who have you taken that you've had good experiences with that relate to this? And occasionally there may be someone that may not be particularly good for your committee. And you may not know that, but faculty may know that, and your major professor. And that can be content-wise. And I'll just be blunt and honest because I was an outside chair in one of these where two faculty were fighting over their ideas in relationship to the student, and they had different paradigms about what should happen. And the last thing you want is for you to be the avenue for paradigmatic fights or any personal history that's happened before. Again, that's rare, but at the same time, you need to be aware of you need to have guidance from your major professor who has been around and knows those particular dynamics. And so, because it's not just content expertise, is you're building a team, right? And the team needs to have work well together to support you to come out and be done. And then you also need to know, what do you want? Do you want a really sort of intense feedback to really prepare yourself? Or are you really going more towards the profession? You have other responsibilities and you really rather get out a little bit faster? That you have different purpose, and different faculty have strengths depending on that particular purpose.
Dr. Black, let me just add to that question because Tassian added a follow-up question, and we will conclude with that. What is the difference between the major professor and the advisor?
Well, often it can be synonymous. It can also be different, right? Because so sometimes the vocabulary base is chair, there's major professor, there's advisor. So sometimes those are used synonymously. Sometimes advisors often used for more broadly a program and not necessarily a dissertation. But sometimes it's used. But the more appropriate terminology would be major professor, or in some spaces, chair.
Thank you very much. Dr. Black, Dr. Carlo, Dr. Han, thank you very much for taking the time to share your insights and wisdom with us today. Thank you everyone for joining us for this discussion, and we hope to see you all connected to the College of Education Graduate Student Council. These are our accounts. Please follow us if you don't, and the QR code will take you directly to the Bulls Connect page, and you can be a member with us from there. Thank you all very much. Speakers, would you like to add anything before we conclude?
I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed these 2 hours. Thank you for considering me for this.
Thank you very much.
Just echoing same thing. Thank you, and I really appreciate the Graduate Student Council coordinating these series of events. Someone said if they wish that they had something like this during their doctoral early years. I had the same thought. Oh wow, if this was in place for me 20-something years ago, maybe. I mean, I'm fine. I'm happier right now, but I think those are things that I feel wow, that would have been great. So appreciate all of the coordinating efforts here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. wonderful event. And what's nice about this is I think it's sort of natural conversation that hopefully shared sort of our perspectives on this. And so thank you for the Graduate Council, and let's keep this going.
Thank you all very much. Thank you again for being here. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, audience, and the board members. Thank you all very much. Wishing everyone success, following these wonderful advices from our speakers. And please, Dr. Ann, go ahead.
I didn't have anything to say. I was just clapping. You guys did a great job.
okay.
Everyone, speakers, board members, wonderful.
Thank you all very much. And this will conclude our event for today. This is the first part of the series. Stay tuned, and you will get news for our next events. And thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.